Hi, my name is Madison Snyder, and I'm a fourth grade teacher at Bonnie Kate Elementary.
And I'm Ashley Fleming, and I'm a fourth grade teacher at West Hills Elementary. We are so excited that you guys are here to join us this week, and we can't wait to read, talk, and write about some text. So let's get started. Miss Snyder and I have been video conferencing, and we have planned a lesson, and we are so excited to get to share those ideas with you today about our text and some extension activities. We speak for all of your teachers when we say that we miss you all and we wish we were in the classrooms together. We're so excited that you have chosen to join us in our virtual classroom today. If this video is difficult to understand today, feel free to do some of the following options. Turn on the closed captions, adjust the speed of the video, pause and watch it again, or you can pause and discuss with someone in your home. Just like we've mentioned in previous weeks, some of these texts might be familiar to you from your fourth grade class this year, or maybe even from last week's video, and that's okay. We can revisit texts together with a new purpose. It will help us gain new information and help us become stronger, more fluent readers. I know that many times when I take a second look at a book or an article, I find new information that I might have missed, or just more clarification on something that might have been tough to understand. And we learned a lot last week about Navajo code talkers. Over the past few weeks, we have been discussing mysteries and puzzles by looking at natural and man-made optical illusions, by looking at how animal experts solve the mysteries of animal behaviors, and now with the puzzles that surround secret codes and why they are necessary. We're going to use those same sleuth skills we've been talking about with our text recognizing Navajo code talkers. Will you continue to be those amazing sleuths that we know you are and help us by digging into the text one more time together and with a new purpose? Remember, we're going to use each of the sleuth steps and be specifically looking at answering this question. Why are secret codes necessary? In last week's lesson, we mentioned some codes that came to mind. For example, codes used during war to send secrets, secret codes used when planning a surprise party, and even codes that have been left behind in ancient times to communicate how people may have lived. Today, we're going to revisit a text to see how valuable a secret code can be. As a reminder, to be a good sleuth, you need to gather evidence, ask questions, make your case, and prove it. Remember, when gathering evidence, we must be observant and write down notes or annotate the text. We'll practice this again today with our text. When we ask questions, they should be questions to gather facts and evidence. These questions can lead to interesting answers. Next, to make our case, we must remember that everyone doesn't think the same or have the same opinion. We, as good sleuths, should be curious about others' answers. We can ask questions to understand how others come to their conclusions. Lastly, when we prove it, we can look back at what we learned to determine what is most important to share. We present our ideas in the most clear and convincing way to make sure our audience clearly understands. Since you all know how to be such amazing sleuths, do you think you can help us continue to understand mysteries and puzzles found in our text?
Today, we are going to take a look at the passage, Recognizing the Navajo Code Talkers. Let's keep in mind our central question, why are secret codes necessary? Look at the title, Navajo Code Talkers. What do you remember from last week about the Navajo? That's right, Navajo is a Native American group. This group was recognized as code talkers, and today we're going to continue to learn more about them. Last week we mentioned the desert region in the background of the passage. Well, that's because the Navajo capital is in Window Rock, Arizona, and that was in the third paragraph. So that helps us understand why the author chose that desert background. Now, as we're reviewing today, feel free to annotate or highlight the text. We have a new purpose for reading today. We're going to complete the first activity in this diagonal here. For the extension activities, I chose to do that diagonally. So let's see what we're doing first. Gather evidence supporting opinion. Throughout the text, the author discusses the Navajo code talkers, but never explicitly says how he feels about the code talkers. Write a paragraph inferring how the author feels about the code talkers and support it by using evidence from the article. Wow, that sounds like a challenge. I'm ready for it. Remember, you are welcome to underline or circle key ideas and details. We have a new purpose today, so you may want to use a new color or writing tool. Our purpose for rereading today is to infer how the author feels about the Navajo code talkers. Since the author never explicitly states how he or she feels, we really need to gather evidence that the author included to reveal the author's perspective about the code talkers. We must then connect why the author included those details to what that must mean about the author's perspective. Let's read to gather that evidence. On July 26, 2001, 4 Native Americans received the highest civilian award that the U.S. Congress can give, the Congressional Gold Medal. Inside the Capitol in Washington, D.C., President George W. Bush addressed the audience. He said, "Today, America honors 21 Native Americans who, in a desperate hour, gave their country a service only they could give. In war, using their native language, they relayed secret messages that turned the course of battle." What is the first honor or recognition we see the code talkers receive? That's right, the highest civilian award, or the Congressional Gold Medal. Why would the author include this honor? Let's keep thinking as we continue to read. Who gave them this award? That's right, George W. Bush, the president at that time. What did he say to them? That's right, they gave their country a service only they could give. Do you think this was the entire speech the president gave during the ceremony? No? Why do you think the author chose this excerpt? Maybe he or she chose this to show us how he or she feels about the code talkers. This portion of the president's speech really shows how the president honored and respected the code talkers' contributions to World War II. Let's go ahead and continue reading aloud together the next paragraph to learn more about the people who were being honored. The 4 men standing beside the president were John Brown, Chester Nez, Lloyd Oliver, and Allen Dale Jr. A 5th man, Joe Palmer, was too sick to make the trip to the Capitol. These 5 men were the only survivors of the group of World War II Marines who served as Navajo code talkers. The text states that the 5 men mentioned were the only living survivors. Why do you think the author included this? I remember from last week that these men were not honored until much later. I wonder if he or she included this to show that not all the men lived to be honored as they deserved and earned during their time of service. So far, the author has included how the original code talkers were honored with the Congressional Gold Medal. They even added a graphic source to help us see this historical moment of the code talkers being honored. Based on this, infer how the author feels about the code talkers. Maybe you said he likes them, or he thinks they deserve to be recognized, or he respects the code talkers. Let's continue to read to infer how the author feels about code talkers. Remember, they're not going to explicitly tell us, so we need to continue to gather evidence to support how he or she feels. Let's read the 3rd paragraph. I'm going to pause in the middle because it goes on to our next slide. It took about 60 years for these men to be recognized for their service. Soon after, however, they received even more acclaim. A toy company redesigned some of their action figures. They had them speak the Dene code, a Navajo language. Let's pause here. There's a lot to digest in these first few sentences. First, I see the code talkers were not recognized for about, that's right, 60 years after their contributions. Why would the author include this? Perhaps the author wanted us to understand that the ways they were honored were later, but they were eventually honored. Remember, they were not allowed to talk to anyone, including family, about how they helped during World War II. How else were they honored? That's right, action figures. The figures even spoke the Dene code. What an honor. Let's pick back up at the words 4 months. 4 months after the ceremony, a member of the U.S. government traveled to Window Rock, Arizona, the capital of the Navajo Nation. He presented silver medals to more than 100 code talkers. These men were survivors of a unit of 399 soldiers who had been trained by the original group of code talkers. Hollywood later released Wind Talkers, a movie version of their story. How were the code talkers recognized? I see silver medals were given to more code talkers, and you're right, there was a movie made after them. How do you think this made the code talkers feel? Yeah, maybe they were thankful that they were finally getting recognized for their help during World War II. Now why would the author choose to include these? Maybe it's to continue to show how they were honored and show how the author really respects the code talkers. Let's read the next paragraph. Remember, we are inferring how the author feels about the code talkers. Now the author is giving us an example of a specific code talker, Bill Toledo. Notice his picture next to the text. Code talker Bill Toledo received a silver medal. He was recruited to the Marines from high school. He was a code talker for 3 years, from October 1942 to October 1945. Toledo served in many battles and faced incredible dangers. On the island of Guam, he barely missed being hit by sniper bullets. Thanks to his quick feet, he escaped unharmed. Later, while marching through the jungle, he was mistaken for a Japanese soldier. He was taken prisoner at gunpoint. Once the mistake was realized, he was given a bodyguard so it would not happen again. Explain Bill Toledo's experience. First, we see he received a silver medal. Did he receive his medal first before he served in the military? That's right. He was a code talker first, then he received his medal much, much later. He was in battles and faced incredible dangers. The author goes to describe some of those dangers that he faced. For example, dodging sniper bullets, or even being taken prisoner at gunpoint. What sacrifices did Bill Toledo make? That's right, he dodged bullets. He was taken prisoner. Why would the author include these? Maybe the author wanted to explain that they were not only relaying these messages to help win the war, but they were in danger, just like the other Marines. Maybe he or she wanted us to understand how difficult the code talkers' jobs were. Well, let's read the last paragraph together. Toledo says it's important to share his experiences with younger generations. He wants them to understand freedom comes at a cost. He wants them to appreciate the sacrifices made so that Americans can enjoy their freedom. In the last paragraph, Toledo says it's important to share his experiences with younger generations. Why is that? Right. He said he wants them to understand that freedom comes at a cost. Why would the author want us, a younger generation, to know Bill Toledo's experiences? Maybe it's because freedom does come at a cost. What does that mean? Freedom comes at a cost meaning a payment for something. The payment for freedom is the sacrifices that people had to make. Like Toledo explained, he had to dodge sniper bullets and he was mistaken as a Japanese soldier and taken prisoner for us to have freedom. They even had to sacrifice not telling people of their valuable role in the war to continue protecting our freedom. So, how does this support how the author feels about the Navajo Code Talkers? Now that we've reviewed the passage with this new purpose, let's see what one of our activities could have looked like. So, we were gathering evidence to support the author's feelings towards the code talkers. So, we were inferring how the author feels. As I was reading, I jotted down some notes, and I think I can infer that the author really respects the code talkers based on what he or she chose to include in the passage. So after I took some notes, I wanted to organize them into a plan. Organizing in this way will help me write a cohesive paragraph, and cohesive means that the ideas I'm writing about will be connected in a logical way. So first, I want to have a topic sentence for my paragraph. And I thought maybe something along the lines of the author respects code talkers. I then want to support that with the idea that they were honored. So I listed a couple ways they were honored: congressional gold medals and action figures. Then I thought of another supporting sentence to explain how he respects them by talking about the sacrifices the code talkers had to make, like risking their lives and having to stay quiet about their contributions for 60 years. Then I want to conclude my paragraph by somehow repeating that the author respects the code talkers. So after that, I finally went to write my paragraph, and here's what I came up with. The author respects the code talkers. Throughout the text, the author gives examples of how the code talkers were recognized. For example, some received the Congressional Gold Medal, and they were all made into action figures. The author also mentions the great sacrifices the code talkers made. They risked their lives for our country and could not share their contributions with anyone. Based on the evidence the author chose to include in the text, he or she clearly respects the code talkers. So let's see if I've got all the things of a well-written paragraph. First, a topic sentence. The author respects the Navajo code talkers. Now I need to see if I have evidence from the text. I see Congressional Gold Medal. I see that they were made into action figures. Both of those were in the text. Then they risked their lives, like Bill Toledo, dodging sniper bullets, and then not sharing their contributions, that being quiet for 60 years. Then do I have a conclusion sentence? There it is. Based on the evidence the author chose to include, he or she clearly respects the code talkers. So a well-written paragraph has all those things. Your paragraph may look different than mine, but make sure you have those elements of a well-written paragraph.
You know, Ms. Snyder, I think you did a great job supporting your inference of the author respecting the code talkers. I think you did a great job of including some evidence straight from the text, but also I really hear your voice in the explanation and the elaboration. I think you did a great job. Now, let's see some other examples of some of the activities you could have completed. I went across the bottom of this tic-tac-toe board while Ms. Snyder went diagonal. She's already modeled this very first activity, so I'm going to model another activity for you. The first activity I completed was the gathering evidence, where we were asked to research and find more information on the Navajo code talkers. So I headed over to the KCS at Home website and I clicked on the supplemental resources. There, I found the link to Kids Info Bites. I read over a small article about the Navajo code talkers and I jotted down a few things more about who they were and perhaps why they were so significant during World War II. I then took the information and summarized it into a paragraph. Now, before I put it all into a paragraph, I thought about all these notes that I jotted down, and I noticed that some of them support this idea and about why they were significant. But I want you to notice that I left a couple of the things out. For example, the fact that the Navajo lived in Arizona and New Mexico, I jotted that down because I remember we talked about the background picture of the story, but I did not include it in my summary. Now, can you remember some of those things needed for a well-written paragraph? If not, you could rewatch some of Ms. Snyder's video on her paragraph, or we listed them right there in the tic-tac-toe board. So here's the paragraph that I came up with to summarize the new information that I learned. Being a Navajo code talker required both brains and bravery. During World War II, Navajo men were recruited to the military to create a code. This code was difficult because it used the Navajo language that was hard to understand. The code talkers had to memorize over 200 Navajo code words. The code talkers then had to go into many battles to relay these secret messages, which showed bravery. In conclusion, the unbreakable code and the courage of the code talkers turned the course of World War II. Now, let's look back at some of those key components of writing. One of the first things we know we want is that, yep, you got it, the topic sentence. I chose being a Navajo code talker required both brains and bravery. Here I used two words to describe the information that I found, brains and bravery. I supported those 2 points with key details from the text and then elaborated on those key points to create more elaborated thoughts in complete sentences. Some of those key points were that they had to create a code, that they had to use the Navajo language, it was hard to understand, and even that they had to memorize over 200 Navajo code words. Lastly, I restated my ideas with a conclusion. In conclusion, the unbreakable code and the courage of the code talkers turned the course of World War II. Now, one last key component to a well-written paragraph was going through my writing and making sure that I used correct grammar and punctuation. I made sure someone proofread my writing and we discussed how I did not capitalize the words code talkers at first. But when we looked back in the text, we noticed that it was capitalized both with Navajo and when Navajo was not in front of it. This let me know that both times code talkers is being used as a proper noun.
I love how you really explained those details that you found and elaborated so well. It connected so well with brains and bravery.
Thanks.
So the next activity I chose to do was the prove it research. I wanted to create some sentences using some words from the text. So let's take a look at those sentences. The first one, I used the word Capitol. When I visited Washington, D.C., I saw the Capitol building where Congress meets. The next word I chose to do was address. The new speaker looked nervously around as he began to address the waiting audience. And the final word was congressional. The Congressional Gold Medal is awarded to people who have made a positive impact on the United States. The directions said to create super sentences. I know as a fourth grader, a super sentence would be a compound or complex sentence. Each of the sentences I created are complex sentences which contain an independent and dependent clause. So make sure you're working hard to make those complex sentences.
The next activity that I decided to complete across the bottom of the tic-tac-toe board was the making your case. I reread the passage to identify some cause and effect relationships. Excuse me. This is a text feature that authors use to help connect information to their audience or their readers. For example, Bill Toledo was taken prisoner while traveling through a jungle because he was mistaken for a Japanese soldier. This really explains to me why he was taken prisoner by his own country. Now, the last activity I completed in my tic-tac-toe board was the Prove It timeline.
I did the same one.
Oh, great. Would you mind to help explain some of the things on our timeline here?
Of course.
So, we needed to take some time, some of the events that happened and place them in a logical order that we could justify aloud to someone. So, for example, in the passage, it mentioned Bill Toledo receiving a silver medal before it described all those experiences he had during his time as a code talker. So I knew that I had to place his time in the military on the timeline before he received the medals.
Something I noticed while reading is the text didn't always give us exact dates, but the years or other clues, like 4 months later in the text, helped me to place them in chronological order.
Oh, I see that. Something I did look up on the same website as my gathering evidence activity was that the year that World War II began to start on my timeline. I wanted to make sure that I had the exact year. So I made sure to label that at the beginning of this particular timeline for 1939.
Mm.
Now, lastly, I really want everyone to notice the large gap that we placed between when Bill Toledo was recruited and served in the military and when the Congressional Gold Medals were received by the original Code Talkers. This gives us a visual to show the 60-year gap of time before the Code Talkers could be recognized for their valuable part of the World War II.
So let's review what we did in today's video. First, we looked for details in the passage that support an inference we could make about the author's perspective. I modeled for us how I planned and then put my ideas into a well-written paragraph.
Next, I modeled for you how I researched further about the Navajo Code Talkers, and then I summarized that new information again into what we want to be a well-written paragraph.
And lastly, we added more to our understanding of our essential question, which was why secret codes are necessary.
Guys, we are so excited that you joined us today at KCS at Home. And we want you to be sure to visit any of the resources there or on your school's library and media page in case you want to extend any more of your learning on this topic or other topics. We look forward to learning with you again soon.
My name is Madison Snyder from Bonnie Kate Elementary.
And I'm Ashley Fleming from West Hills Elementary. And we want to give a special shout out to Ashley Croft, our ELL teacher over at Spring Hill, who's helped us with our lesson planning and videos. Thanks again for joining us, guys.
Thank you.